Hello, hello. I have another yin yoga class for you today. And I know we've had a series of yin on this channel, but I do find it especially needed during these warm summer months. I also happen to be teaching a local yin class, so I really spurred up my personal interest in incorporating it into my life, especially as in the summer it seems like I am just so busy and I have to force myself to slow down and find the yin side of things. So today's class is a spinal mobility class, and we will work the 6 movements of the spine. We will have the forward flexion, the backward extension, also the lateral opening on the left and the right side, and some twisting involved as we start our class. So let's go ahead and get started. You may want a couple of blocks or a blanket folded up or to cushion yourself. Those would both or all be very handy for you to have during the class today. So let's just go ahead and take a nice seated position on your mat, legs crossed, however you feel most comfortable. If you would like one shin in front of the other, and just start to close the eyes and settle in. Hands can rest on top of the knees or maybe folded lightly into your lap. As you start to slow down, maybe the eyes start to settle and softly close. Every time we begin a class, I find that as soon as we start to root down and ground into the mat and take those first moments of just stopping everything, the first thing I start to do is think about my breath. And I notice just the normal rhythm of my breath. And maybe as I sit here for a minute or two, I notice how I may start to elongate the inhales or the exhales. As we move through the poses today, each pose will be held for anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. So there's lots of time to find your version of the pose and what will suit you today. Remind yourself that yoga is not what you see, but it is what you feel. So keep in mind to always respect your body and know your limits. And we'll talk about that more as we move through the poses and what we're looking at and what we may be targeting or what you may feel that you want to target in your body today. There's many options to take, and there's no need to go beyond what we are looking for here. We want to find an edge, but not go past it. We want to stress the joint to help us build health and mobility, but not to cause any sharp pains. We'll get started by staying in your seated position, but we'll take the arms and just cross them across your chest, maybe grasping a hold of the opposite shoulder. And from here, take a nice inhale. As you do so, feel the crown of the head reaching up tall. And from here, we're going to start to bend the head forward. Now, most of the time when we bend the head forward, we're just tilting the chin down and just basically just tilting the top of the head down. But let's think of lifting the crown up tall and visualize the back of that neck, creating space throughout the vertebra. And as you do so, keeping the crown lifted, and slowly start to tilt the head forward. The spine is still sitting up straight, so I'm not rounding in my back. I'm still very straight in the spine. All I'm doing is creating length in the back of my neck. And you can tell I'm not trying to force the chin down. I can still speak very easily. But this is creating a very nice stretch throughout the back of the neck. Just to get started today. On an inhale, very slowly and very gently, we want to be very kind to our neck. Come back up into a neutral position. From here, we will reverse or just take the opposite clasp of the arms. So now the left hand can be on top of the right shoulder, the right arm on top of the left. And from here, we'll come into a forward fold. So again, let's think of lifting up tall through the crown of the head, sitting up nice and tall, lengthening through the spine, visualizing space in between all those vertebrae. And from here, start to bend forward from the hips. The spine is nice and straight. Coming to a point where you can no longer lean forward without the hips starting to come up off of the mat. But we'll allow the back to round and we'll come into that spinal flexion. Come down as far as you can allow, just rounding. And from here, the neck just is loose. The head is heavy. And also feel the hips continue to stay grounded on the mat. So even though we are rounding forward and leaning forward, feel a heaviness in the bottom of the thighs. Feel that connection of the sacrum to the mat. On an inhale, slowly rise up. Starting to lift the back, we'll end by lifting the head up tall. And we're back to neutral. From here, take the left hand to the right knee and we'll take a twist over towards the right. Inhale, and then exhale, deepen, looking back behind your right shoulder. On the next inhale, we'll come through center and we'll take that over towards the left side. Right hand on the left knee. Using that hand for a little bit of leverage. The left hand is behind you to help you sit up tall as you exhale. And maybe get a little bit more rotation through the spine. And on an inhale, return back to center. From here, we're actually going to come up to standing. Now, yin only has one standing pose, and that is called dangling pose. So from wherever you're at, slowly bring yourself all the way up to a standing position. Now, I may be slightly out of frame. Hopefully, I'm mostly in there for this. But from here, let's inhale the arms up to the sky. Gaze can come up. And then exhale, we'll swan dive, just as we would in a vinyasa flow, but start to deeply bend the knees and allow the stomach and the chest to start to rest on the tops of the knees. And then the head starts to hang heavy as we come into dangling pose. I'll turn to the side here so that you have a little bit better view. In your dangling pose, again, the knees can stay deeply bent, especially if it's been a long day and your hamstrings are very tight. Today's class is all about spinal mobility and feeling it in your spine. If you're trying to lengthen the back of the legs, you're really going to get more of this into your hamstrings. But if you're focusing on the spine and a release of the lumbar spine and also creating some space along the entire back body, you may feel very justified in keeping a nice deep bend in the knees. As you're in this position, the hands can rest on the mat, and it may feel very good for balance since we are holding this much longer than we would in a normal yoga class. You may feel a little bit more balanced here as we are in this inversion for about 1 to 2 minutes. Just as we are in our normal forward fold, try to feel the weight go further into the front of the foot instead of leaning back on the heels. And then just relax. If you find yourself in a gentle sway back and forth, that's completely natural. I find that some of these poses, your body wants to have a slight movement. And even though we do encourage stillness in yin classes, having a little movement, if that's what your body is requesting, that's perfectly fine. Now, as we start to come out of our dangling pose, I want you to take an even deeper bend in the knees. And if your hands weren't on the mat, maybe use that position for a little bit of a balance so that you don't get dizzy as you come up. We'll come very slowly and then widen the feet out so they're just a little bit wider than hip width apart. And we're going to sink down into our yogi squat. While in our yogi squat, let's find what suits our body today. So you may want to take the full expression of the pose with the knees out wide and the elbows in between the knees. Or if your heels do not go all the way to the ground, know that it's perfectly fine to stay up on the toes. And maybe use your hands or your fingertips for a little bit of balance. You can also take 1 to 2 blocks and place them underneath your tailbone if you would like to just use a block and rest it there. When I started, that was the position I first started with in yogi squat, and I found that much more relaxing. And I also found myself able to get deeper into the pose over time by just taking those small steps by using the props. So we'll stay here in our yogi squat for just a minute. Now from our yogi squat, take your hands and place them down on the mat in front of you. And we're going to lift the hips up once more. Bring the feet back to parallel. Allow the knees to bend, and we're going to come back into our dangling pose for about 1 to 2 minutes. You can stay just as you were last time. Or if you feel very good in your balance, you may want to clasp the elbows. Use that as a bit of traction for the head, the neck, and the spine. Or you can also take the fingers and interlace them back behind the head. Allow them just to rest there as a gentle weight. From there, the chin just tucks slightly.
And you use that gentle weight just to cause a nice elongation through the back of the spine. Again, we're not pulling. The hands just rest.
And very slowly, before our legs get too tired, let's set the hands back down to the mat, and we'll widen the feet out once more at a diagonal and lower our hips back down into our squat or yogi squat. Settle in, take the version that suits you best. And if you would like to take that neck traction in your yogi squat as well, again, take the fingers and interlace them behind the head. Start to tuck the chin down. And then just rest the hands on the back of the head. Allow the elbows to curl in alongside the ears. This is a very introspective posture. It's a very healing posture, very deep into the hips. We all hold a lot into our hips, a lot of tightness, a lot of emotion. When you're ready, you can release the hands. And if you're able, maybe without using the arms, you can just allow yourself to sit down onto the mat. Or if you were up on blocks or any props, go ahead and remove them. And we'll arrange ourselves to come back into a center position on the mat for a half butterfly in our yin yoga. So extend the left leg out long and then draw the right foot to the inside of the left thigh. And from our half butterfly, we'll start first with the forward flexion in the spine, and then we'll work on the lateral flexion. So from here, lift the arms up, feel the sides of the ribs grow, and lengthen as you lift up and then start to bend from the hips, staying nice and long. And then once you come to, about a 45-degree angle or probably a little less, then you'll feel the back start to round. And then just allow yourself to fold over that left leg. The knee of the left leg should stay facing upward. The toes should also be facing upward. The hands can just rest on either side of the leg. No need to pull. This is a good time to check in with the other parts of the body. Besides the parts that are obviously working a little bit more into the hips and also the hamstring. But check in with the muscles of the face. Make sure that you're not tightening along the jawline or into the throat or along the neck. Continue to breathe, nice and even breathing. Allow that breath to travel down your spine. Feel it travel all the way down into the hips and into the back of that left leg. On an inhale, slowly rise up. We'll keep the left leg exactly as it is, but you may want to open up that right foot and have a little bit more space. From here, adjusting the tailbone, maybe shifting a little bit back and forth. And we're going to take a side body lean over to the left side, opening up through the side of mostly through the right side of the rib cage. So as you reach up, again, think about growing tall and keeping length through the sides of the body. And even though we're side bending towards the left, think of keeping that length underneath these left ribs, even though they will be bending. So inhale the right arm up, lifting up tall. Again, keeping length through those left ribs, even though your right ribs will be stretching and bending even more. But we want to imagine that space that's created on both sides of the body so that we continue with that movement, that opening through the side body. And as we do so, if you're comfortable, you can take your right arm overhead as I'm doing, or you can also have it behind your back, or even just resting on the top of the right thigh. If you're feeling any tingling into the right fingertips by having it overhead, then it's best to have it below you. As we hold here, continue to reach that right arm long, almost like it's trying to reach that left foot. As we hold a little longer, maybe you can lower a little deeper. The right hip should stay grounded. And you're looking at opening the chest, rotating the chest upward towards the sky. To come out, we will slowly lift up. Maybe use that left hand to push yourself upright, and we'll come back into a neutral position. From here, let's take just a little bit of a counter twist, rotating towards the right, and then moving towards the left. Excellent, very good. We'll take that half butterfly over to the right side. So let's extend the right leg out, draw the left foot to the inside of that right thigh, and from here we will lift up and then extend forward, keeping the spine nice and long until we reach the point where our back naturally starts to round. And we can allow everything just to fold over the top of that right leg. Again, if you are looking to have more of a hamstring stretch, then you probably want to keep your back more straight. You'll feel it more into the hamstring. If you want to continue the theme of the class and just allow the spine to relax in flexion, then you can allow yourself to round. But if you feel any pain in your low back as you come into this rounding position, then you're in a better position to just return to a straight spine so that you can protect your low back. Wherever you are at, just respect your body and know your limits. On an inhale, let's rise up. From here, maybe open up that left foot a little bit more. Balance out the weight between the sit bones. And from here, we're going to take that side body lean over towards the right. So let's lift the arms up to the sky. From here, imagine keeping length in both sides of the body. But then we'll start to round over that right side. Maybe the right arm comes to a block or all the way to the mat. Left arm can come overhead or behind the back. Wherever you're at, the left hip stays grounded. Noticing any difference between your left and right side. I'm definitely much tighter on this side. We'll take about 5 more breaths here. On the next inhale, you can use that right arm to give yourself a little bit extra oomph to come back up into a neutral spinal position. From here, let's take a gentle twist over towards the left. And then one over towards the right. Very good. Now let's go ahead and spin around so that we are facing the front of the mat. And we'll take our caterpillar pose, which is basically a seated forward fold. Now, again, we're looking for that spinal lengthening, less so in the back of the hamstrings. So unless you are very flexible in the back of your legs, you'll probably want a nice bend in the knees. So even if you're all the way up here and want to fold over your legs, like so, for your caterpillar pose, that's wonderful. But wherever you're at, you could just start with the knees with a very good bend in the knees. Lift the arms up. Again, as we have done with our other poses, start to bend from the hips. And then allow yourself to round over the legs. Now, as we hold here for a few breaths, maybe you find that, you can maybe straighten out the legs a little bit more. So, I find it a little easier to rock my tailbone and come further back in that direction versus trying to pick my legs up and make them longer. So whatever works for you, if you want to stay with a very deep bend in the knees or start to straighten the legs just a little bit. But focus on releasing the head down. The neck is nice and loose and the head hangs heavy.
On your next inhale, use the hands, start to draw them back, and then use the hands to push yourself upright.
For this next pose, we're taking a supported bridge. So go ahead and grab a block or 2 blocks. And we just had a very deep fold along the hips. We're going to use our supported bridge to open up the front of the hips and come into a spinal extension. So start to come down onto your back with the knees bent. And from here, you can decide if you want to use 1 block or 2 blocks. Of course, 2 blocks will make it deeper, but I do suggest, first of all, having the blocks right underneath your tailbone or your sacrum, and then also having the blocks on the longer edge instead of having just 1 block tilted up high like this, because it is rather unstable. So if you have a couple of blocks handy, if you want to take your supported bridge a little higher, feel free to do so. Lifting the hips up. And we'll stay in this pose for a couple of minutes. Arms can stay down at your side, or you can also bring them up and overhead if that's comfortable. If you would like to increase the extension on the spine, you can play around with extending the legs. But again, avoid any tingling in the arms or the fingers if this does not feel good to you. Now we just had that very deep fold along the front side of our body. Now we're opening up, flattening out the front side of that hip flexor. At the same time, we're also extending the spine. Use these spaces in every pose to return to your breath. Focus on the inhale and the exhale, and any thoughts that come to your mind, allow them to pass without judgment. Allow them to move on without any lingering effects. With care, if your legs were extended out long, start to draw the feet in first so that they're flat and supporting you, and then bring the arms back down to the sides if you had them extended. From here, you can push into the feet and then remove any blocks or blanket that you may have had stacked underneath your hips. And then return your hips back down to the mat. From here, if you want to take a couple of windshield wipers, by all means. And when you are ready, we can roll on to our left side. We're going to push ourselves back up and then spin ourselves around, drawing the feet underneath us, and then we're just going to come to our stomachs, extending the legs out long, and we'll come all the way down, resting down onto the pubic bone as we come into Sphinx pose. In our Sphinx, just give a little check of the elbows so that they are slightly in front of the shoulders, making space. It also feels good to have the hands or the forearms in a slight diagonal for some more space, and the pointer fingers are pointing to the top of the mat. In your Sphinx pose, the feet are open up wide to create space for the low back, and we think about lifting the chest forward and upward. So if you can think of almost like you are pulling on if you have a sports bra on, you're pulling on the sports bra straps, or maybe imagine you have a pair of suspenders and you're using those suspenders or those straps to lift the chest up and towards the sky. So here we're also coming into a nice spinal extension. In Sphinx, I do recommend keeping the neck still at neutral, so we're still mostly facing forward. It's just slightly upward with the help or the assistance of the chest shining upward. We don't want the neck to come all the way back to create those wrinkles in the back of the neck, because that is too much of an extension in this pose. If we were more open, say in a seal pose, or perhaps even in cobra, you could allow the neck to extend a little further. But for now, just focusing on keeping that chest lifted up. We're pressing down through the tops of the feet. Check in with the glutes so that you're not overly tightening in the glutes, because that will cause more tightening in your low back. From your Sphinx, let's go ahead and lower down onto the back of the hands for just one moment.
And then from here, let's just shift the hips from right to left so that we can release the hips.
When you're ready, take the hands underneath the shoulders. We're going to shift ourselves back and onto our seat. And from here, we're going to spin around and come to our backs and set up for Bananasana pose. We'll just call it banana pose because I do have a hard time saying that. We are going to make like a banana. So, as you are ready, let's lower down onto our backs. Extend the legs out so we're in a straight line from here. And we'll start first by moving the upper body, keeping the hips fixed in place. And we're going to move and shift the upper body so it comes to this back right corner of the mat. The hips are still right where we started. And from here, let's lift the arms up overhead. Maybe grasp the left wrist with the right hand. Now we want to move the legs to the top right corner of the mat. So we're making this nice, big, ripe banana shape. Our goal is for that left hip to stay planted on the mat. You should feel a nice lengthening through the whole left side of the body, through the underside of the left armpit, through the left the rib cage, and also through that left hip is where you probably feel this peak. If you want a little more, you can try crossing the left ankle over the right. Some folks like crossing the right ankle over the left because it helps them feel a little bit more grounded. And if you do have a left hip that wants to roll upward on you as we're making this crescent shape, if you have a sandbag or something heavy that you can lay across that left hip to weigh it down, that also feels very nice. And we'll just hold here. Allow the hip to be heavy. Feel the breath fill that left side body through those intercostal muscles of the ribs. Allow the the belly to expand. And relax and release. Slowly, let's make our way over towards center. And just realign as we would almost in a short shavasana. Maybe rock the hips back and forth so you can just feel the body weight balance out. Move anything that needs to be shifted. And from here, we're going to take that over towards the left side. So the hips stay right where they're at. And we're going to shift the upper body, lift it up a little bit, and we come to this back left corner of the mat. Take the arms up and start to bend the arms towards the side as you make this rounded shape, and maybe grab the outside of the right wrist with the left hand. From here, we start to move the lower body. Again, the hips stay right where they're at, and the feet come to the top left corner of the mat. Now feeling the extension through the right side body. Take a moment to see where you're at. Check in with that right hip. Make sure that it is glued towards the mat. If you'd like a little bit more, you can cross the right ankle over the left. Making like a banana. This is also a nice shape that you can take in a standing position. So just be standing, cross the right ankle over the left. Start to push the hips out over towards the right. And then side body lean over towards the left side. Take one more inhale. And when you're ready to release, you can come back towards center, straightening out the upper body, bringing those legs out straight behind you, shifting the hips from right to left. From here, we'll take the knees in, draw them in so that the feet come to touch the mat, and we're going to take a reclined twist. So from this position, let's lift the hips up about an inch or two off the mat, and we're going to shift them over towards the right, 1 or 2 inches. From this position, we'll allow the knees to fall over towards the left side, just simply stacking the right knee on top of the left. Place the left hand on the outside of the right thigh as the right arm extends long, either into a T shape or maybe into cactus. From here, you can gaze up towards the sky. Since we are doing a spinal movement class, let's play around with the gaze. Maybe turn the head towards the right side. Allow that right ear to rest onto the mat. We'll take just a minute here in our spinal twist. Maybe 3 more breaths. When you're ready, release the legs, allow them to come back up into center. Shift the hips so that they are back in towards center as well. And from here, we'll take that twist over towards the right, but first, again, lifting the hips. This time, we're going to shift them over towards the left, about 1 to 2 inches. And then from here, the knees fall over towards the right side. the right arm on top of the outside of the left thigh, and then maybe the left arm goes out long, T-shape or cactus. That is yogi's choice. From here, we can play around with the spinal movement by using the neck and face towards that left hand. We'll take about 3 more breaths here. We'll begin to unravel our twist, lifting up the hips so that our spine comes back into a nice straight position. And we'll extend the legs out long as we come into our Shavasana pose and allow the feet to open up wide. Taking the arms out alongside the body, palms facing up, and the eyes gently close. Taking these last 2 minutes in our Shavasana just to absorb our practice, to thank ourselves and give ourselves some gratitude for showing up on the mat today. Remember that your body thanks you for taking the time to slow down. Your brain might be telling you to go, 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 but we all need a little break, a little time to ourselves, a little time to heal both physically and mentally. Knowing your limits, knowing your body and what it needs is very important. Take the time to nourish yourself physically. And as you start to grow in your yoga practice, you'll find that you start to nourish yourself both emotionally and mentally. When you are ready, you can slowly start to draw in the legs, either rocking up to a seated position or maybe just slowly rolling onto your side and pushing yourself up to seated. From here, we'll come into a cross-legged seat. Inhale the arms up towards the sky. Exhale as you draw the hands down through heart center, sitting tall through the crown of the head, and then take a small tuck of the chin and a gentle close of the eyes, again with gratitude for showing up to your mat today. Thanks for joining me in class. I hope you enjoyed this yin class and you found it very beneficial during these hot summer days. Have an amazing day or week or whatever. Make it a great one. Bye.